Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Fund It Fast chat. I want to start off the conversation by just saying a huge thank you to everyone that has supported our efforts over the years. Thank you so much for being here to help us celebrate our 60th webisode. It kind of feels surreal to even be saying that. But we aren't here just to celebrate for the sake of doing so. So we want to make sure that you are able to take away something from this conversation that's helpful for your efforts. So in developing this webisode, we decided to take two Fund It Fast chats that have received the highest attendance and also have received the most post-recording streams on YouTube and kind of weave those into a conversation. So they just so happen to be our webisode number 32, which was monetize EVs and LCFS credits, and webisode number 39, which was the California Clean Vehicle Rebate Program. So those two webisodes, along with conversations that we've been having with our local government partners, just let us know what topics are most important to you. So we are here discussing EV procurement and some of those related aspects that have been a concern for our partners. And to help us with this conversation, I have invited Steve Clarke. Steve Clarke is the Vice President of Clean Mobility, Energy, and Sustainability for Answer Advisory. We're very lucky to have Steve here with us to share his expertise on the topic. Welcome to the Fun and Fast Chat, Steve.
Thanks, Rochelle. It's great to be here.
Awesome.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So before we dive in, though, really quickly, I just have a couple of minor reminders. Please make note that your microphones have been muted before joining the call. We do this simply to minimize background noise. If you have any questions at all, I encourage you, go ahead and drop those questions into the chat box. We will do our best to answer all of those questions toward the end. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump in. So one of the things that has been part of the conversation with our local government partners is, and Steve, you can jump in here and give us your thoughts on this, but really it has been an issue with our partners is the availability of the product itself. So I've heard lots of feedback from our local government partners that the vehicles, they're just not available. Steve, can you weigh in on that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's not untrue. A lot of these vehicles are not available or are not available in the mass quantities. And they have long dealer wait lists or they have massive dealer markups, so on and so on. The good news is that I think that tide is turning. I was at a huge clean fleet conference last week. And the big manufacturers, they're still trying to smooth out many of those supply chain issues to meet the demand. They realize this is an issue and they're trying their best. Ford, GM, and Stellantis, we heard, are setting up long-term, 30-plus year materials contract to ensure a steady supply of EV materials on into the future to hopefully resolve some of that. But I think while we are still in that circumstance, it may not be a bad thing. And what we like to do is think about it in a little bit of a different way. Given that EVs are going to require new infrastructure to fuel them, charge them essentially, with EV chargers, or even if you were to go hydrogen fueling, the delay in vehicle availability really allows people and agencies to the time to install necessary charging or fueling infrastructure as well. And as you all probably know, that's not exactly a fast process. The other relevant thing I think I'll add to this is that there are many more vehicle options coming to market. So if one manufacturer is hopelessly backlogged, more product availability from other manufacturers allows purchasers to look to other brands. I strongly encourage folks to conduct pilots, select a vehicle or two to collect the data that they need and assess suitability before replacing a fleet en masse. And you can usually get your hands on one or two vehicles at this point, and that's much easier than replacing an entire fleet at once. There's also other options that we like to work with our clients and help them consider, like fleet as a service. This is really where you're not buying a vehicle, but you're using someone else's vehicles on an as-needed basis. You basically show up at the site where these vehicles are housed, or maybe it's your own site. You pick up a freshly washed, serviced, and charged vehicle in the morning, drive it all day long, and you return it at the end of the day, and they take care of everything. The fleet providers, they've managed to secure all sorts of different kinds of vehicles, and it's really central to their business model. And then I think the last thing I'll say here is, when we look at, exploring switching over to electric vehicles, it's really important to examine your fleet needs. We've been working with a client who used to have his M&O staff driving around in pickup trucks, all day long between all the different, this was a community college, so between all the different campuses, and conducting whatever they do. After looking at their operational need, they were able to switch most of their fleet out to electric golf carts and those smaller, utility vehicles. They saved a ton of money on fuel and maintenance, and they've gone electric in a very non-traditional sense. So you may not need the same vehicle as you take this opportunity to, assess your fleet needs and electrify your fleet.
Awesome. I can't wait to start seeing all those innovative and kind of out of the box sort of solutions start rolling out here. But I have to address the elephant in the room, so to speak, Steve. Electric vehicles are just more expensive. So how do I reconcile this cost? And what are some of the other factors I should be considering to make these purchases pencil out?
Oh, that's a great question. And I think first off, yes, they are more expensive. The upfront cost of an electric vehicle versus an equivalent internal combustion vehicle is more expensive. We're seeing up to almost 40% more cost when you factor in the vehicle and the necessary charging infrastructure, because you can't just buy a vehicle and expect to do what you've been doing with it. It will work for a little while and then it'll die, and then it won't be any use to you. But really what we like to think about is, let's look at that first cost, right? The Inflation Reduction Act is back, and they've got, the significant tax credits, $7,500 in some cases. And that actually now can be direct paid to agencies. So you don't need to be somebody with tax liability. You can still take that $7,500 as a direct pay or almost a rebate to buy those clean vehicles. You look at LCFS credits, which I know you all have talked about on previous webinars here, and that can cover a lot of your fueling costs. So that helps reduce some of those costs. And the real savings happen though when you start looking at cheaper fuel or electricity, right? That's going to power your vehicles and maintenance. We were talking to a fleet owner the other day, and they have a initial fleet of F-150 Lightning that they're collecting data from to assess, how do I justify this greater upfront cost? And really what we're seeing is, based on the data that they've been taking for a year or two with their vehicles, calculated out over the life of the vehicle, they're expected to spend about $7,000 on electricity for those vehicles versus $37,500 on fuel change or fluid changes and gasoline over the life of the vehicle. So, that's a significant difference and really helps offset the cost when you look at the entire life cycle cost of the vehicle, not just upfront costs. And of course, the bigger the fleet that you've got, the more that you save. Now, obviously, your mileage may vary depending on which vehicles you have and how long you run them and what you pay for maintenance and fuel and that kind of stuff. But as we see, the volatility in gas prices and a general increase, I think this is going to be, and a reduction in upfront costs for EVs. This is just going to become more and more and more of a no-brainer.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Steve, let's pretend for a moment that I'm a local government and I'm looking to convert my fleet to EVs. Now, I may have some anxiety about those vehicles not being charged and ready to go when I need them. And particularly, I'm thinking about emergency vehicles. So does that mean I'm safer to just buy a charger for each vehicle, or how do I address that?
Well, you would be safer, but you probably would also be out a lot of money you didn't need to spend because you overbuilt your infrastructure. It'd be like almost buying an individual gas pump for every single vehicle. It would be safer, it has more redundancy, but it'd be way more expensive. And so I can offer a couple thoughts to help assuage some of your anxiety or local government anxiety with regard to charging. And it really starts with a good fleet analysis. That's kind of that first step. There's a number of really cool tools out there that we use on a regular basis. EV Energy's Better Fleet tool or NextEra Energy's EIQ tool, which can really look at your existing fleet's duty cycle. It helps you select virtually proxy vehicles and understand really how much charging you're going to need to run those vehicles on your existing routes. Through that analysis, we can also identify when you'll need to charge. Do the vehicles sit in a yard overnight, and have 8 to 10 hours of doing nothing where they could be trickle charging? Or are they on call 24/7? Are they swapped out in a 30-minute shift change? So really understanding when the vehicles are available to charge, that helps design those charging solutions. And if indeed they need to be ready at a moment's notice, perhaps there's a charging solution that will allow them to be ready, but it's not a single charger per vehicle. Second, after we've done the virtual analysis, then we look at really conducting a pilot and verifying real world conditions. Even though the EPA will rate an EV to a certain range, if you start putting on cargo and toolboxes, or you just drive like a jerk because these cars are really fun to drive and you can take off faster than any other vehicle around you, your mileage is going to vary. And so, you need to understand how your folks are driving the vehicles with them loaded up in the real world condition. And a pilot's a great way to do that. Next, I think one of the things we look at is smart charging. Oftentimes a single charging unit can have multiple different ports, and there's charge management software that can allow a single charger to charge multiple vehicles, sometimes sequentially, sometimes in parallel, but everything's hooked up and a software is figuring out what vehicle to charge and when. The charger electronics themselves are really the expensive parts of the charger, and adding another port is fairly inexpensive. And having those extra ports does indeed allow for that flexibility in charging. I've seen fleet analysis and charging analysis done really well, and I've also seen it go completely awry. There was not to name names, but there was a seemingly legitimate fleet electrification consultant that was working with a municipality that had 42 police cars. And I was looking over the report, figuring out what solutions were being recommended. And they recommended that this municipality look at 180 kilowatt DC fast charger for every single police car that they had. That city then started trying to scratch their heads and figure out, where do I get 7.5 megawatts of demand needed for those chargers and the additional $6.3 million in funding for that project? I think there's a better solution out there. And then finally, I think with regard to this question, I'll say that, understanding indeed that utility demand, right? What can the utility provide you with regard to charging capacity? Sometimes this is a perceived limit, or sometimes it's a real limitation of infrastructure. You may have your charging strategy dictated for you by the amount of power available. And we have to look at, how do we charge your vehicles within the capacity given by the utility. And sometimes this means moving vehicles to other locations, considering different charging strategies, or even looking at solar and battery storage to limit that grid-facing demand.
Yeah, so that's definitely those are definitely all things to consider. What I want to kind of touch on next is, we have in past webisodes, and in fact, that's partially why we're here, but we've talked about various rebate programs on the Funded Fast Chat. Many of those rebate programs and incentives can actually be layered on top of each other. So if you wouldn't mind, Steve, just kind of touching briefly on the opportunities that are available to our partners now, and what that looks like.
Sure. Yeah. This is really what makes a project or breaks a project, is, do we have the funding to replace the infrastructure and buy the vehicles? So it's really important. And like I said before, the Inflation Reduction Act, that has a lot of opportunity for public agencies, now that that direct pay option is available, you don't have to partner with somebody with a tax liability anymore. So the things like the alternative fuel vehicle refueling property tax credit is now available for public agencies to take a tax deduction on property purchased to refuel alternative fuel vehicles. There's the commercial clean vehicle credit. And then there's also, thinking of things like pairing solar and storage, like I mentioned before. If you're looking at pairing that with your EV project, the investment tax credit for those is also available to agencies now. There's other federal dollars that are available, things like the National Vehicle Electric Infrastructure Funding, or NEVI funding, as you'll hear it shortened to, which is designed to increase the frequency of DC fast chargers along main travel corridors. Similarly, there's the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Grant, which is a competitive grant designed to increase EV chargers in rural areas. That's actually coming, first round of that is coming due at the end of May. We're helping a couple clients figure that one out, but it's expected to re-up every year. So, if you don't make this year, take a look at it more closely for next year. And then, rumor has it, with regard to solar and storage, Department of Energy is going to be running a solicitation soon for microgrids in rural and underserved communities, to which EV charging could be a huge component. So we'll keep our ears to the ground for that one. On the state and local side, that's just federal. So on the state and local side, right, we've got California HVIP, which is offsetting the upfront cost of new vehicles, offering point of sale rebates for the purchase of clean trucks and buses. We've got Cal EVIP, which provides incentives for EV charging and for both level 2 and DC fast chargers. The money comes and goes for these programs, so check with the websites to make sure that indeed there is funding available. But I was on there this morning actually looking at it, and while some DC fast charging for Cal EVIP seems to be fully subscribed, there is a lot of level 2 funding still available for Central Valley of California. So it's worth checking and seeing whether that might meet some of your needs. And then indeed, we've got, the LCFS credits for the fueling. They can work with that, and also the utility make-ready infrastructure programs. Again, depending on the funding and how subscribed they are, but it is a great way to get a lot of your make-ready infrastructure paid for.
Awesome. So Steve, you have done such an amazing job of taking a wealth of information and kind of boiling it down for us. But I just wanted to touch on one last thing before we get ready to go. And I believe I speak for quite a few of our partners when I say this. We just don't have time to manage all of these different moving parts. And I'm thinking of one of our local government partners specifically, who literally wears 3 different hats, right? He's the community development director. He's also the facilities maintenance director. He's also the principal at the local elementary school. So what sort of advice would you give to someone who just doesn't have the capacity to manage all of this?
I can't understand why he wouldn't want another role to be an EV charging expert, but in the event he doesn't, I think selfishly, I'd recommend that they hire somebody knowledgeable in all things EV, energy, and sustainability. I can't put my finger on who that might be. But in all seriousness, I think that's what our Clean Mobility, Energy, and Sustainability group was designed to do. It's really to help our clients work through the challenges associated with their energy transition. And that includes solar, storage, EVs, and everything, buildings, everything that now runs on electricity. We specialize in meeting customers wherever they're at, helping them tackle their biggest challenges and really moving plans and intentions through to implemented projects, which ultimately are what we're trying to get at here, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, reduce operating expenses. And implement it. You need an implemented project to do that. And there's a lot of different approaches to consider depending on your different circumstances. We could help you look at whether it's a statewide procurement or a master service agreement, or even writing your own procurement for whatever your project needs are. evaluating the benefit of EV charging or charging as a service versus a standard arrangement. Looking at hiring somebody to maintain that infrastructure, to service your vehicles, optimize your fleet charging. Really for a small fee, you can significantly de-risk your exposure and make your fleet, continue to do what it does, but in a zero emission plan.
Well, I'm all in favor of de-risking things. So with that, I will go ahead and I want to make sure that we save a few times. I know we're quite right around at the 20-minute mark here. I want to take a couple of questions. Steve, I'm going to put you in the hot seat because we've got a couple of questions in the chat box here. Okay. I want to make sure that we get to all of those. So let me pull this up really quickly because I did see them pop in. I always get so excited when I see questions. So here we go. Uh-oh, having a little trouble scrolling here. Here we go. Okay. So one question, do you know of any cities which are using Fisker EVs? These have solar roofs which extend the range considerably.
I do not. Are you speaking? Let me think. I was at the trade show and I saw Fisker and they rolled out their giant super luxury sedan. I'm assuming that's not the Fisker product that you're talking about. I think they did have some sort of work vehicle, and their solar roofs would help extend the range. To how much, I don't know. I have not seen any cities that are actually using those yet. But I'll definitely keep an eye out for it.
Awesome. Yeah. So I believe this was Alice's question.
Okay.
So, and she was nice enough to leave a link here. So
yeah, let me check that out.
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to include that in our follow-up resources so we can all kind of take a look. So all right, I have one more question here. And I think, Steve, you touched on this during the conversation earlier. The question or comment is that municipal governments don't qualify for tax credits,
right.
So it's more difficult for them to justify the costs of EVs.
Right. Traditionally, they haven't. In order to take the tax credit, a municipal government would need to partner with an agency or somebody with tax liability. You think of a company like ours. We would say, okay, we'll buy the vehicles and pass the savings along to you, essentially. Something like that. Now with the Inflation Reduction Act and what's called a direct pay option, a lot of these tax credits are actually available to municipal governments now directly. You don't have to go through a third party anymore. So it's certainly worth checking out in more detail to be able to just take those tax credits yourself as a rebate right off the front of the purchase.
Yeah, that's definitely great news.
Yeah.
That is all the questions that I see. So I would like to thank you again, Steve, for taking the time to be with us this morning. I know you're a very busy person. And I want to make sure that everybody knows we are sending out a follow-up email as we always do. That email will include links to all of the resources that we discussed this morning, as well as related Fund It Fast chats. So you don't have to go digging around on our YouTube page to find them. What's next for the Fund It Fast chat, though? Well, we've got something really special in store for you next month. We are on a slightly different schedule for June. Our regular schedule for the Fund It Fast chats actually falls during the 14th annual California Climate and Energy Forum, or CEEC for short. So the SJV CEO team will be participating in that. And since we can't literally be in two places at one time, we'll be having the Fund It Fast chat on June 6th. So 1 week early. Don't miss it, though. We will be discussing the California Energy Design Assistance Program, or CEDA for short. As always, of course, we want you at every webisode of the Fund It Fast chat, but if you're unable to make it for whatever reason, please keep in mind each episode is recorded. You can find them on our YouTube page. Don't forget to like and subscribe, or if you couldn't get all of that down, just remember you can access all of our resources at sjvceo.com. fund-fast.com. And with that, thank you everyone for joining us. And I hope everyone has a wonderful week. Stay safe and stay healthy. Until next time. Bye, y'all.
Bye.